So for this next part, we're going to be adding our servo arm to our yaw mechanism. And as you can see, I've already taken my servo out of the box. Go ahead and do that. You can set the actual servo aside. And what you want to do is find this nifty little servo arm piece from your accessories bag. And you'll see right here, this part is protruding from the actual arm. So this protrusion you're not going to touch because it actually goes on your servo. If you flip to the other side, just get a 2D view. So this part you're not going to touch, the really protruded area. It's like a good let's see, it's really a good centimeter up. You're going to flip to the other side with a smaller extruded area, or excuse me, protruded area, and you're going to take your sanding block and just run through it. Doesn't that take that much to sand? Once this part is flat, I'm actually going to do it a little bit more. Just get it on camera so you can see. Just basic sanding. We don't really need to go over much here. Now this part is flat. It's going to go onto your yaw mechanism like so. This middle area right here is going to line up with the center of the carbon rod. So make sure you do that, mark it up. What I actually do is I take a pencil and then I mark the center of my carbon rod. Just do it right now. And when I shine a light on it, or when I look at it from an angle, I see the mark shining. So marker doesn't work well. I mean, if you have like, I guess whiteout would work. Just put a dot of whiteout on there, or maybe silver marker. I don't know what you guys use, but anything that's not black will work. Besides a pencil, because it actually shines. So what you're gonna do is line your servo arm up and make sure that you allow. This is kind of hard to do. Let's see. Zoom in. Make sure for this part, when you put the servo horn on, you allow 2 holes to be on the yaw mechanism itself, because what we're going to be doing is drilling 2 holes inside and using screws to hold this on, as well as epoxy. So now that I'm done mixing my epoxy, I'm just going to first set my arm right on top just to see how I'm going to center it. Make sure that both of my parts have enough room for screwing a small screw into. One of them is definitely going to be going on this part right here, and then the other hole should be lined up so that both screws could have enough plastic. Okay, so when you're applying the epoxy, you want to be careful not to get any on the hole that you're going to be using to drill. So just be aware. So now that I have this on, I'm just going to put my piece right on. When you're doing this, you want to make sure that the hole is actually centered, because if it's not, it can actually cause stress to your servo. So you really want to take your time and make sure that everything is down and perfect. If you have a 5-minute epoxy, I believe it works even better for this purpose, as you don't have to deal with a long set time, which is what you have to deal with the normal epoxy. While I wait for my yaw mechanism and servo arm to dry up, I'm actually going to work on the motors. And as you can see right here, I'm using DT750s. So I've gone ahead and I mixed up some more epoxy for taking care of the motors. And so essentially what we're going to be doing is gluing or epoxying the motor leads to the motor bell itself, or not the bell, I'm sorry, the motor insides with where the coils are. So what you're going to be doing is applying epoxy to this end and then putting it onto the coil. So any movement with the wire will not, make it break. This is actually the weak part of the motor. The wires, if you bend it around too much, is going to break. So in order to compensate for that, we're going to be applying epoxy and gluing the leads to, or the beginning of the leads to the coil itself. Now the trick for this step is not using too much epoxy, because it does happen where you apply too much epoxy and then the bell gets stuck to the insides, and then that's a broken motor and no one wants that. So make sure you're underusing epoxies if you're going to be doing anything. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to apply some epoxy to the heat shrinked part of the wire leads, and then I'm going to apply a little bit more. Again, moderation is key. You don't want to be using too much epoxy here. You don't want to ruin this motor, because it really sucks having to do that. I've actually ruined like 6 of them. Okay. So once you got your epoxy on, you want to just stick them down. Stick the leads down, of course, and hold it with one finger for now. Make sure it's turned in such a way that the epoxy doesn't flow up. So you want to set it down like that. Now what we're going to do is take some tape, and it's hard doing this with one hand, but you'll be able to do it if you just give it enough focus. Now what you're going to be doing is taping down the leads to the side of the motor. Now you might want to do, if you're using electrical tape, you might want to make a full or even 1.5 turns with the tape, and like so, cut it off. And you can set this to dry for 5 minutes, however many minutes your epoxy takes. So again, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to apply a little more epoxy because I feel like it's not secure enough. You want to be very careful when you're doing this, though. You could definitely ruin your motor. Okay, so now our yaw mechanism should be all dried up. My epoxy takes around 15 minutes to set, 24 hours to reach maximum strength, but we could start doing our drilling now while we wait on the motors to dry. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to find the smallest bit. In my case, I have a 1/16 inch bit available, so I'm going to be using it. And you're going to drill into the 2 holes, the 2 holes on your servo. Let me see if I can get a zoom on this. Okay, so the 2 holes on the servo that lines up with the top part, or this part of your yaw mechanism. Now, just going to take the drill, try to get a nice perpendicular angle on it. So I'm just going to check for this stuff. You don't need to drill too far in, because this is just to get the hole started. Now, I see that my hole has been drilled and everything is okay. So there are some pieces in there, pieces of nylon, I think, and so what we're going to do is just go over it again. Great, now that's our hole, and then we're going to do the same to the other side as well. So go ahead and line it up, try to get a good 90 degrees on it. And then same deal, extract, clear the hole. You'll have some white stuff with white nylon in there, and you just go over the hole again, and there, you should have two nicely drilled holes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take screws from this 9-gram servo and implement it in here. You guys should be familiar with the popular 9-gram servo that you can get on Hobby King. I'm sure you have many laying around, and set aside the servo, take apart the accessories pack, and then use one of the 3, or I should say 2 of the 3 included screws. Okay, so now that you've drilled your hole, you want to take a screwdriver, any size screwdriver, provided the bit is sharp enough or small enough for the screw. You want to take that and just work your screw in by hand first. These strip very, very easily, so you want to be very careful when you're working with these. And so just work them in by hand first. We're going to try the other hole. Seems like it's more lenient. There we go. So it's good, just be gentle. So now that screw is in, we're good to go for the second screw. So do the same thing to the other side, and I'll probably cut the video because you don't really need to see, you don't want to see me repeating the same process over and over again. And if you've done everything correctly, you should have a yaw mechanism that looks like this with 2 screws. What I'm going to actually do is have some more epoxy on here just to reinforce the joint, and then we will cut off the excess servo arm parts. So after everything's ready, we're going to cut off the excess part on the servo arm with a Dremel, of course. And you don't use this flat because you're mounting your other arm, so. Okay, now that the top part is done, we're going to do the bottom part as well. Turn your Dremel up. So this should be our final product, and we're ready to go on to the next step. For this step, we'll be putting on male bullet connectors onto your motors. And as you can see here, my motors are dry. The epoxy on my motor has dried, and I could bend the lead without the bare wires straining. So make sure you have the male end of the bullet connector and put it down in your helping hand, just like putting on the bullet connector onto your ESC. This will be a similar process. So what we're going to do is we're going to tin the ESC, we're going to tin the bullet connector. You don't need too much solder in there, but make sure you have enough. what you want to do is take a motor, and then the motor's leads have already been tinned, of course, and just dip it in. Now you probably have to hold on for a good 10 to 15 seconds for the solder to cool down, and once you've done so, you can let go, take something that's insulated, and release the bullet connector. Examine your connection and make sure it's something you can trust. Bullet connector issues contribute to many of the issues in multi-rotor applications, so you guys need to make sure that this step is done correctly.